Oh, my name is Faduma Ibrahim, and I am the Somali Community Liaison and Director of Development Assistant
Where?
at the Cedar Culture Center.
And I'm Adrian. I'm the Director of Development at the Cedar Cultural Center. I'm sure that you all know this, but we're an organization whose mission is to promote intercultural appreciation through music. And we've been doing a program called Midnimo, which is Somali for Unity, that engages Somali artists in week-long residencies with the purpose of increasing understanding and awareness of Somali culture. And it's been an interesting and challenging journey, the reason why we talked to Jamie about doing this workshop is because we have gotten a lot of inquiries by phone and email and in person from people who want to book Somali artists at their event or festival or whatever it is that they're doing, and it's kind of difficult to you can't just hand off a name and a contact number and think that it's going to work out. And so there's a lot kind of involved and a lot to explain. But I thought maybe it makes sense to go around and introduce everybody and who you are and what you do here in town.
Oh, I'm Zahar/Khadija. I work at the West Bank Business Association as an outreach/program coordinator.
Cool. Mohammed Samatar, and what am I doing? Development assistant at the Cedar.
Oh, you already said yours. I'm Matthew Harris, and among other things, I have an organization called Handmade Heartfelt Minneapolis, and working on a project right now, which I'm excited about, called Mother Courage Caravan, which is taking its artists, performers, and artisans, performers, communities, and sort of connecting with smaller towns around the state.
My name is Asafar, and I work at Mixed My name is Molly Chase. I work at Springboard for the Arts, and where we help artists make a living and a life, and understanding how to connect with artists is very important to us. And then very secondarily, I work with Huge Improv Theater, which is unscripted, usually comedy, but mostly unscripted theater in Lowland Lake neighborhood.
I'm Emmy Carter, and I work also in development at the Cedar.
Cool. Great. So Fadumo and I just kind of outlined some of the different bumps in the road that we hit when trying to identify and book Somali artists. So where do you start? So Fadumo, do you want to launch with where do you start? You want to book a Somali artist for your event? Where do you start?
So one of the questions is like, how do you identify Somali artists? Is that Somalis and Ethiopians and Oromos kind of like look like? So it's really hard to figure out on the road like, oh, who is this? How do I know if this is Somali artist or Ethiopian artist? Is most like the first thing to do is to Google, and when you Google searching like by saying artist, Somali music artist. For being very specific, and then you will get a list of artists. But the funny thing is that the next thing many people do is like, how do I know they are famous? Or I want to make sure that I contact with or I get a hold of an artist that if I bring, that will bring a lot of audience into my doors. And then that is the next thing to do is go on YouTube and see their views, like how many views. The more views that they have, the popular they are. That's how it is. And then it's I think that one of the other thing is that the hard thing is that it's hard to know where that artist is from. Like when you go to YouTube, you see all these clips of Somali artists and that have like a lot of views, but at the same time you don't know where they live. So then it's a matter of what am I going to do next time? You don't know what to do from here on. Is that so the way we are like we're doing at the Cedar is a little bit different. Even though that now we're kind of like looking back and trying to write down all the steps that we can hand it to somebody. Say this is how you get Somali artists. We're still learning. So even though that we feel like we're master this. We're still learning. There's still a lot to that we can learn from. So what we have done is that in the way that that you can get a hold of most of the artists is finding a Somali music promoter. and how do you find a Somali music promoter? So asking your Somali neighbor, your Somali co-worker, anybody that has a connection to the Somali community, asking them, hey, can you connect me to a Somali music promoter if you know any of them in town? Which there is 2 famous ones, and then there's a lot that consider themselves their promoters.
Yeah, so I mean, and that's consistent with the fact that the Somali community is a do a lot of things by word of mouth.
Yes.
And so it is a lot of networking, basically, which is a lot of what we've had to do in order to connect to the right artists. As a matter of fact, one of the most famous Somali singers, artists, maybe ever, is Miriam Mursal. And she is older, she's still living, she's in the UK. And even before I came to the Cedar more than 10 years ago, the artistic director at the time was always wanting to book Miriam Mursal. But no Somali singers or bands or artists, except for maybe Kanan, have Western representation, who are booking their tours and reaching out to venues. And so it wasn't easy for him to figure out, well, how do I book Miriam Mursal? Because he's working with these different booking agencies. And so we are hosting her next month. And she's going to do a big finale performance at the Cedar on November 14th. And the way that we got in touch with her is through networking. Fadumo's asking, everyone thinks that they know, oh yeah, she's my cousin, she's my aunt, so then Fadumo's connecting the dots to finally get to a point where she's actually able to get on the phone with Miriam Mursal. So that's how we did it.
Yeah. And to get to Miriam Mursal, literally, like, if I think about, like, just the numbers of how many people, like, I went through, was like 10 people. From one person to the 10th person, and all the way to, then to, I talked to her directly, and I was able to get her direct contact information. And then also that the hardest thing was that even though I had her direct contact information, that she gave it to me and I kept calling her, she was in Denmark. And then the next week she's in Sweden. And then the next week she's in Oslo. And I'm like, you gave me a London phone, but you're still traveling. How can I get in touch with you? And then it was kind of like, oh, talk to my son to give you more information. And then her son happened to be like the most helpful person ever. Like, I had to actually get done everything that I needed from her through her son. And then finally kind of confirm with her and talk to her. She's like, oh yeah, my son's updating me. I signed everything. Everything's good. So it's one of those things. And she's older, of course. That's really hard to kind of explain every single thing point by point. That's also another thing, like patience and trying to tell her, yep, this is what it is. And then literally I had to explain some of the contracts more than 10 times on phone, by email, by text message. And because, like, when we say you're going to do residency, at the Cedar, we have never done residency. I mean, we've done the residency before I came, but I don't know how that, it seemed like it wasn't like as intensive as this one. This one is like a week long of activities, of performances, of workshop, and we've never done something like that before, of course, before 2 years ago. And then now we're doing this, we know all the details that needs to be discussed. And when I presented this to the Somali artists, especially the international artists that we wanted to bring here, it's kind of like, okay, I come and I perform, okay, but why am I there for like a week? What am I doing for a week? And then going through all the details about what the residency is on, all the things that we want them to do, is also another conversation that actually happens more than 10 times. It happens before, it happens after, and then it happens also after they got here, and they're like, why is this list so long?
I think that's also, though, speaking to the fact that touring artists who have Western representation kind of know the drill. Mm-hmm. They understand what typical things are in a contract for venues that are in the U.S. Mm-hmm. or in Europe. For more like mainstream venues, I guess I would say. And so there's a lot of different things that we've had to explain that we've often took for granted, such as a radius clause, which of course means that the artist can't perform somewhere else within 50 miles for 3 to 6 months before or 3 to 6 months after. And the Somali artists who aren't used to having to sign contracts like this or aren't used to operating within this system are going, oh great, you're flying me there, so I'm going to go perform over here the week before, and we're like, no, you can't do that. And then this is also how we've identified the artists a lot too, is through networking and asking people, who is it that the Somali community wants to see? But YouTube hits are really helpful because that's the primary way that a lot of individuals in the Somali community actually consume their music.
Music, yeah.
So the next thing that we should point out is that Somalis who consider themselves performing artists are almost always singers, just exclusively singers. So if you say, hey, I'd like to book an artist for my festival, and you call someone and say, okay, we're going to pay you $1,000 to come perform, they're just going to show up themselves. And they're going to say, okay, give me the microphone and I'll sing. So that's something that you kind of need to work out ahead of time. If you want a full live band, that's something that you're gonna have to
Do it
figure
yourself,
out.
yeah.
You're gonna have to, get their music and get those. Get backing musicians to play that music and then make sure that you have all of the equipment that you need, because the Somali singers are used to going to a non-traditional venue and putting their CD in and just singing along to the CD. And so most of the folks that we talk to who want to present a festival or an event, the setup is expected to be different than that. So. And then also, Fadumo had mentioned about Somali promoters, and there certainly are Somali music promoters in town who have strong connections to a lot of these artists, but really all of the Somali singers are really almost exclusively representing themselves. But a promoter in the Somali music community is really just somebody who's
Giving you contact information.
who a lot of people will come to us. A number of individuals have come to us and said, oh, I want to book so-and-so at your venue. It really just means that they think that they can find so-and-so in order to act as the middle person to kind of take a cut of money. It's not because they necessarily represent them contractually or regularly even. So that's kind of an interesting thing to note. What else, Faduma?
I'm looking at the list.
We've also, of course, a lot of the Somali singers that are in the community live not here, but live abroad, and so that's been a whole nother process of securing working visas. And then when in securing working visas, there's also the consideration of needing to pay the taxes on that. And so 30% of, unless there's a central withholding agreement, which some countries in the U.S. can have a central withholding agreement, which also costs money to create, we have to send 30% of a performer's fees to the government for taxes of a non-resident performer. So that means that, if somebody wants to walk away with a $10,000 check, we actually have to pay them. Their fee is actually going to be $15,000, or somewhere around there, because we actually have to send 30% of that to the federal government for non-resident performers. Yeah.
And communication. Communication is also one of the things that we had difficulties with. Communicating with the artists that already signed a contract with us. Sometimes that we have some follow-up questions. Sometimes we want to plan the whole residency, but we're stuck about some information that we want from them, and sometimes it takes weeks. If you don't have the direct contact information with that specific artist, if you have that middle person, we have experienced that it used to take weeks just to get an information about when are you coming, when do you want us to book the flight. And then that person in the middle person was like, oh, I call them, but they're getting back to me. But having that direct contact information with the artist made it a little bit easier. But the other thing is also that that we had problems were when the artists come here. Timing. 5 o'clock, 5 o'clock. We have that workshop. It's at 5 o'clock, and the driver is just sitting there for like 4:45 or 4:30 sometimes, and like you have to be at Augsburg by 5 o'clock. You guys like, oh wait, we're coming. So
and that's not exclusive to Somali artists.
I only worked with Somali artists, so I mean, I starting working at the Cedars, like I only worked with Somali art, and I only work with Somali artists, so that always making sure that they're on time and trying to, even if after residency is over or after everything is over, and then you call them or you email them. If you email them, first of all, expect nothing. And then even this, we have some artists that we've been working for 2 years now, that are local artists, and we email them about a lot of things, and then we have to call them and say, hey, I sent you an email, can you read that and get back to me? Like, you have to follow up if you want an answer to that email. Otherwise, nobody responds, and then you call them and you say, hey, I sent an email about 2 weeks ago. They're like, oh, I didn't see, I'm just gonna read it right now.
Again, consistent with the word of mouth.
Yes.
It's like email is not the primary priority for communicating.
Exactly.
So.
And even doing outreach for our non-Somali events, that we have giveaways for a lot of the shows that we have at the Cedar, is that we send an email to the Somali community, and then like 2 weeks or a week before the show happens, and then we send an individual email to each one of those people, which is like about 400, 500 people, and then I follow up with like a text message. And then sometimes call individuals that I know and say, hey, there's this amazing show. Are you still coming? You said you're gonna come. Because some people will say, yes, we will come, and put me on the guest list, but they don't show up. So, yeah.
Maybe you guys can talk a little bit about what it was that you were interested in about this topic in particular. What brought you here today?
For me, it's just, this Mother Courage Caravan thing is new, but as it develops over time, to me, its success depends on having as a wide variety of people as possible. And so I'm actually gonna apply for a fiscal sponsorship, but I'm still tightening up the language around it, because in a large part I think of it as a collaboration of curators who also have sort of a teaching bent to them as well. But anyway, so for me, and it's a little more wide open, so I'm thinking of Minnesota artists, people who live here in whatever city in Minnesota they live in, and so they can be emerging. I mean, you can just find all kinds of different levels of talent, but so I come from a sort of DIY background, and so I'm interested in connecting with artists who maybe haven't had that as much exposure, or people who have artisanal skills, which is, making clothes, working with any sort of textile, or working with, any sort of material to produce a product that they like to exchange with other people, and also food. And I want to have, it'd just be nice for me to have representation from as wide a group of people, to sort of have a marketplace of ideas going on too in all of these towns. So that's kind of my angle, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
My angle is that I know Faduma, Emmy, and Adrian, and I know all the hard work that you guys put into producing the Midnima residencies, and you make it look really effortless, kind of, and elegant. But I know there's so much work that goes into it, and I kind of want to know how long it took you guys to kind of learn, you know what I mean, and how to even create a band, and then instead of having someone just have a track on a CD, but actually have a live band. I know that's a whole nother story in and of itself. That took forever to create. So I wanted to kind of just know about how you guys learn from what I mean, from the beginning to the end, and how you guys are continuing to progress with that, because it takes a lot of effort and commitment from everybody on the staff to do that. So yeah.
My interest is very general. Honestly, I just saw the title and was like, this sounds great. I would love to learn more about it. So I can't say I have any specific thing that's coming up, but generally speaking, if there's a title with artist and how to, probably I'll be there. So.
For some reason I assumed I would be skipped, but I realized that's not the case. I am just interested in the topic because it's what, it's something that I'm involved in and what I do, which I happen to work with these two ladies.
Do you have anything to add? In your experience?
I think that I might, but
Okay.
maybe if we do a question and answer or something.
Okay.
What are we answering?
Just what brought you here and what specifically you might be interested in or curious about related to forging connections with Somali musicians.
Okay. Well,
I work here.
that too, but I decided to sit in this course because I like going to music venues and music shows, especially Somali ones. It's kind of cool to see them live. It doesn't happen often, even though we have a lot of musicians locally. So from talking to them and talking to other artists that are not necessarily musicians, there's kind of distrust between like the mainstream venues and like this like traditional artists. So I want to know how you like gain their trust. So yeah, just I need to listen to it.
Oh, me again. What am I interested in? I like being on stages, so I came to sit on the stage. I like music. I'm a performance artist. I love performing. And I'm particularly what I've seen, the only Somali theater student in the Twin Cities. Haven't come around someone, so being able to listen to how Somali performance happens from the perspective of these two lovely ladies is great for me to understand like what the process was before starting at the theater and seeing where it goes now with the surplus of experience that the theater has. Yeah.
I wouldn't quite say surplus.
Surplus.
Something that came up for me when I was listening to you guys talk is that something that's additionally challenging about engaging Somali artists is that, or maybe I kind of covered this, but it's better to kind of, now I'm going to back up and kind of say it in a nutshell, is that it's not as if there's a Somali band out there that has a manager that you can call the manager and go, okay, I want to book this band. You kind of have to do, it's like a scavenger hunt. And so when we are putting bands together, we are contracting like each of these artists individually and calling each of them, which it's obviously a lot more work to call the bassist and then track down and call the bassist and track down and call the percussion, whether they're Somali or not. And so on and so forth, instead of just talking to a manager who is one person that's representing the band, but also who works within the Western music industry and understands, yep, there's a radius clause and there's a, I know that there's going to be a sound check and I know what kind of backline I'm going to need to request and, I know about, I'm responsible for the taxes and no one has to explain that to me and all that kind of thing. So it's really kind of us having to learn all of the layers of what a manager would almost typically have to do because that manager, there's a void there. And so we're kind of sort of having to weirdly act as sort of the contractor and explaining what a manager would normally do. And maybe that's kind of where the trust has come in, is us not just making decisions for the artists, but really trying to explain or saying, this is what our requirement is, but really explaining every single part of that contract instead of just saying, here's the contract, sign there. Going, well, we can't assume that you understand everything that's a part of this, and so we're going to explain to you multiple times exactly what our expectations are and what it is that you're getting into when you sign this contract.
Yeah.
So.
We were at the beginning. We were in a point where we would sit down with the artists and say, okay, so some of the artists speak English and they read English a little bit, and I'll say, okay, read through this, and then when they read, I'm like, okay, can you explain to me if you understood this? And then they will tell me about, this is this, but I didn't understand this. I'm like, okay, so this is what it means, and I'll reread it over in Somali and English and explain exactly step by step what it is. And some of those artists right now, when I say, okay, here's the contract, they're like, Fatima, I understand. And they start, and I'm like, okay, this is what it is. And I'll summarize everything in the contract before I even give it to them to read it. I'm like, okay, so this contract is talking about this and this and this, and these are the times you have to be there. This is how much you're getting paid, and these are the requirements. They're like, okay. I'm like, no. Read through it again. They're like, Fatima, no. We got this. We understand. We trust you. It's because, it took us about years to build this trust, and now we're in a point where we understand.
And there's very few Somali instrumentalists. There are a lot of singers, and there are a number of reasons for that. Mostly the Civil War, which destroyed Somali musical culture, and singing is, you don't need an instrument to sing. You don't need as much training to sing. And so we are going back to the, one Somali bassist we know, and the one Somali percussionist we know, and the one Somali keyboardist we know. Luckily, the percussionist lives here, the bassist lives in London, and the keyboardist lives in Toronto. So we're going back to them now multiple times to say, can you come and perform with this singer now? And so there's also that kind of building of a relationship, since there's not a whole lot of... Yeah. And then when singers are coming in and seeing that we're engaging these well-known instrumentalists, I think that
they also
bolsters
know
our reputation. Exactly.
That they also know. So some of the, to go back to your question about how, we build trust, is that reaching out to the Somali promoters that they usually reach out to, that they know that whenever they're coming to the city to perform public, to a CD or whatever that they usually do, we reach out to that promoter
to work with
us. So that is where the trust is, because they already trust that promoter that works with us. And then when they all come here and then getting together and then getting to know them, giving the opportunity to get to know us and hanging out with them, and then we all have their phone numbers, and then now when we call them, we say, hey, we'd like to bring you back, but guess what? We're also bringing so-and-so back. They're like, oh my God, we're coming too. So that's that trust that we continue to kind of bring back each one of them, all for different performances.
And to add just one thing, because of the program being such a new thing within Somali music and arts culture, a lot of people know about it from the past year.
Mary Marcel knew about it.
Marcel, yeah. When Fatima picked up the phone, it's like, hey, I'm calling from Benimo. She was just like, yeah, I know you and Benimo. And so that trust has been built through. Yeah.
I think it's also too is that sometimes that even though the organization that they worked with did everything that they could to make sure that to make these groups happy, is that middle person who they
and we cut out
trusted,
the middle
and then we cut out the middle person. There's no middle person with all the artists we work with. I always think, even though that there are some guys who try to be the middle person, I say, listen, you have to give me the email address and their contact information. Otherwise, I'm sorry, I'm going to reach out to another artist that I know will take advantage of it. And they're like, okay, here you go.
And that's the thing, and the problem too with, the Fadumo's talking about the promoters who, have historically flown the artist overseas, but the problem is that they're not really acting as managers, because again, they don't work in the Western music industry. So they too don't understand all of the different aspects. So So we often try to include them in a different way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the thing is that now, at the beginning, the two promoters, actually the well-known promoters in the Somali community that work with us right now, we had to sit down with them too and tell them this is what the greater community music industry, this is how it functions. So when we're talking with the artists and they come back to you, we want to make sure that we're on the same page, so that you're not telling them something different and we're telling them something different. So we had to like explain to them too. And then when I talk to the artist and they're like, okay, and then they will call the promoter and say, Faduma said this. Is that like, yeah, they have to deduct taxes. Yes.
To answer your interest in the work you're doing, I think what would be helpful is just going around, because there are not a lot of Somali artists who are just going to come out, or you're going to find on the internet, be like, hey, there's a fashion designer or this. I think what would be helpful would be, because of the scope of the arts culture we live in the Twin Cities, and Somalis being very much excluded from that world, for you to just go to the shops and be like, hey, I'm doing this project. Would you want to add some this or what have you? And, and just like
just
going
show
around,
up.
just showing up,
Yeah.
honestly. And because the Somali taxi cab drivers or Somali moms who are in the high rises, some of them used to be doctors or lawyers or what have you. So now that they're not in those positions, they're very much hidden from.
A great example is the percussionist that we've been working with, and we've brought him back. I mean, because there are, really, again, very few Somali instrumentalists, and there's this one guy who plays percussion who lives locally. We brought him back to perform with every single Somali singer. And
that he's played with when he was in Somalia.
Yeah, so in Somalia, he was a professional musician. That's what he did for his living. He was he performed with Waberi Group, which was a government-sponsored music and dance troupe, and that was his living.
And Mariam Mursal was part of that
Mariam
band.
Mursal was part of that. And so he was a government employee and a musician, and then he comes to the U.S. and he's going, okay, well, I don't know how to navigate this system. I don't know how to I'm a drummer, I'm a percussionist. What am I supposed to do? Like, someone just hire me to be a percussionist, and so then he has to go, work at a turkey factory or do whatever, and
he worked with one of the band that we work with now. Like, he and Bob known each other for 10 years, and then when we reached out to Bob, he was like, oh, there is this guy. He was like, we didn't even know that. When we, Bob Stack, who is a PhD retired teacher from Augsburg College, PhD holder for music. And he worked with this percussionist. Like, they've known each other 10 years now. And when we reached out to Bob, he's like, there's this guy who's a percussionist. We're like, okay, include him. And then now, all of a sudden, it's like he knows all the artists. And now when we told him that Mariam Mursal is coming and you're included, he's like, oh my God, after 25 years. So
I think it's complicated by the fact that, in the current environment, it's more acceptable to sing to playback. So there's not any demand for live musicians. So, of course, he has much less work to do because there's not a demand for live music.
That's something I totally wasn't aware of before I came here. That's it's really interesting.
And a lot of it, from my understanding, is about the celebrity of Somali singers, and also lack of exposure to the live music. And so we found that once we start engaging the Somali community with live Somali music, they're going, oh my God, holy crap. Like, I didn't know this was possible. This is amazing. Kind of like, this is what I've been missing, And so it's something really wonderful and special and engaging and dynamic. It's not just about going to see the celebrity singer who's my favorite singer, but going to really experience this amazing music.
Do you think that Somali artists like the ones that we work with are competitive with each other?
Yes. Somali artists are always competitor. Like, if you wanted to hire one artist and you ask them that, hey, so-and-so is going to be working with you. I mean, minimal. It took God knows how long it took me to put together, like to bring all North America superstars all over together. I mean, they were banned, and then they're kind of like, oh, we're not talking to each other. And then all of a sudden, like, well, put your personality, your personal issues aside. This is this amazing project, and you get the opportunity to be a part of this amazing project as a band and not individually. So if you're not getting along, then you're not going to be able to take advantage of this program. And they're like, okay. And then they work together. But, I'll just put a crazy example there. My wedding, I wanted to hire the North America superstars, like all of them. And one of the artists was like, no, I'm not working with those two. Faduma, I'm sorry. It's going to be me or them. And I'm like, I'm sorry, I'm going to take them because there's more of them than just you. So, there is that competition. It's kind of like, I'm better than them or I'm better than him. And instead of, but it also gets crazy too, because I'm still confused, to be honest with you, because, like, for example, now Mario Mursal is coming. If Mario Mursal was not coming to the Cedar, if she was coming to do a performance somewhere in the community, they would all get together and say, okay, Mario Mursal is coming, we're going to put our personal issues aside, we're going to do a welcome for her. These people that were not even talking to each other for months and months, now they're sitting on a table figuring out where they're going to rent, how much they're going to charge, which songs they're going to sing. Like, they're all sitting in one circle and just discussing that. But after that performance is over and she leaves, they're not talking to each other all over again. I'm still confused about that because I still don't know what's happening. But I know that they are very competitive, because one person releases a song, in weeks you will see the other person who's like, I'm not talking to so-and-so, is releasing another song for like a competition song. Yes, they are very competitive.
I realize now that I asked you a question that basically that kind of gets you to respond by making a generalization, which isn't what I was intending to do. But I think that that's helpful, because what I've recognized is just that there are interesting and other dynamics, such as kind of what you were talking about, that come into play, that make it sort of like, wait a minute, I don't understand, and so that's an interesting thing that, I mean, as far as I'm concerned, and like you just said, it's like, oh, I don't know, I guess we're still learning, like, how to approach and, navigate some of those kinds of dynamics between artists.
Back to your point, so you think to say that they have issues like, oh, I'm not talking to so-and-so, seems personal.
It does seem personal, and that's why I'm saying that, when I say competitive, is that they're competitive because they have their own issues going on, and they use that to, like, if you ask them, one of them, like, for example, if you put two artists that have a personal issue, they're like, no, I'm not going to work with so-and-so. And if that one...
And sometimes they book a show on the same night.
Yeah,
the other show's booked.
Exactly. If the two that don't talk to each other, if this person books a show, this person will automatically book a show that's almost the same price as this one, and it's kind of like, okay, there's two shows, then now you have to choose which one am I gonna go. So that's like a competition. Instead of saying, oh, are you booking this day? Yes. I'm not.
I'll do my show a different day.
Yeah. So, I mean, and I'm talking about just the Somali local artists, because one example that I shouldn't generalize is that one example, Mario Mursal called me this morning, and she's like, Fadumo, I wanted to double check, when is our event? And I said, well, remember it's November 1st to the 14th? And I said, yes, that's exactly. She's like, oh, okay, because Nasteha Indo is doing a performance here, and she was like, when Nasteha Indo called me, she said, are we doing a performance at the same time in Minneapolis? I make sure that it was not the same time, so that we both are not in town at the same time. And I was like, yeah, you're not. She's like, okay, I just wanted to make sure that, so, and those are Somali artists too. So she's making sure that they're not doing things at the same time. But I'm talking about just the local artists that we worked with.
And there are a lot of local Somali singers, but the community is small enough that, and perhaps it's just a result of that, the community being small and there being personal issues, like you said.
I feel like it goes more of a larger conversation about this idea of revival of Somali music, because for one example, in Mogadishu there was a 300-person performance troupe, that some of the artists we're working with, Marty and Marcel, were all in. And they performed together. And I'm trying to figure out in my head the systems that they use to organize themselves, to be able to perform, to produce, to go, all of them feel like they are in this troupe and feel like, oh, this is what we're doing. And it comes back to now, because of Somali music and production and performance has been put away for such a long time, that now there's like this weird remake and a revival of like, how do we put on shows as a community? And so
it's like starting over.
Starting over again. So just like, oh, you're putting on a show, and just hearing these sentiments is like, not just music and culture died, even the organization of that community,
the structure behind it
has been put away. Because most of these artists that we're talking about were all paid artists, professional artists, and they performed.
Well, they didn't have to organize together because they all performed the same group.
And trying to figure out, is like, were they putting on shows with 300 people on stage doing a million different things, or is it like, oh hey, these 10 people go on this week, these 10 people go on this week? And so it's just like understanding that literally, like when you think about Somali music and arts and culture, it's just been put away for such a long time, and this is
So one thing, and correct me if I'm wrong, the folks that you're talking about that are competitive are not necessarily the folks that were part of that Somali national band.
Correct.
Yes.
So there's like more like brotherly love with the older generation.
Yeah, because there was such a long time of like doing that, and now some of these artists we're working with are so young in terms of since when the war happened, and now it's like they're only backing of like knowledge of like, how do we do this as DIY. They're literally just doing it themselves. Which makes so.
Did you have a question?
Yeah, I did. Like, you guys your work is so deep, kind of like we were saying, like trying to like revive that culture and like starting that spark. And I know like there are a lot of organizations that don't have the capacity the Cedar has, or don't have the staff, or you know, the venue, and they're kind of like, you know, I went to a Minimo event or something, that was really cool. I like to have a Somali artist to, you know, come perform. And you guys are like very, you know, deep and organized, but the good news is, right, there's options for people, because you guys actually, when you guys bring your Minimo artists, you book for them different venues around Minneapolis. And I would love to hear more about how that decision process, you guys go through that, and how, you know, someone, John Doe, I want to have an event with a Somali artist. How can I work with the Cedar, you know, to bring a Minimo artist and have you guys do all the hard and stressful work, and then we can all enjoy the artists, you know.
Yeah, that's a good point. So we kind of started, our first residency was a year ago in October, and we basically looked at a calendar and went, okay, we have to do a week-long residency. What is that going to be? Just guessed. We said we're going to have them, I guess, do smaller performance. We know that there's going to be one big finale performance, and that's the only full-length live public performance that we want to do, but we have to do all these other activities that we don't know exactly what they're going to look like. So we scheduled a bunch of different things that were some combinations of performing a few songs and questions and answers and introductions and meet and greets and workshops and classroom visits and that kind of thing. And out of that, now that we've done 4 or 5 residencies, we've sort of come up with kind of a best practices list of different of events that we can do that are different enough that they provide opportunities for a broad diversity of people to experience and engage with these artists in a wide range of venues. So I guess there's two different things that I want to say in answer to your question. One is that we'll look at what's going on in the Twin Cities during the time that the artist is here. So if there's some kind of huge blowout event or festival, whether it's for the Somali community or not, we want to think through how to bring our artists to that event, because there are plenty of folks in the non-Somali community who don't know anything about Miriam Marsaal, or who don't know the Cedar, who we would like to introduce to Somali music, and who we would like to engage with the Cedar through this residency. And so bringing the artists to a largely non-Somali big event that's already happening in town with a built-in audience is one way to do that. We could bring the artist there and introduce the artist and explain about MidNemo, and we're doing this residency, and this is a really interesting story because of this, and have her perform a song, and then here's this big audience who is introduced to that and going, oh wow, that's really cool, I kind of want to go to the finale. So that's one thing. The other thing is that we want to reach a broad Somali audience, but there are a number of folks in the Somali community who might never come to the Cedar for a finale performance, namely elders. So we want to make sure that the elders have the opportunity to see and engage with and experience Miriam Mursal, and not just that the finale performance is your only opportunity. So it's sort of this juggling act to make sure we're hitting all of these different goals. I think that the main, kind of the most important points are that we don't want to do just another performance somewhere else. We want the Cedars finale performance to be like the special, big, public blowout finale. But we do have our artists kind of give a little sample of their music so that people can experience that. One of the things that we started doing every residency is have as you know, a living room concert. So somebody will open up their house to have the artist perform in their home, and that provides a much more intimate setting where people can engage with the artist. And we've had a pretty good mix of Somalis and non-Somalis attending to these living room events. But it also provides an opportunity for a demographic like Somali elders to come in. They might be willing to come to somebody's home, but they may be deterred from going into what they see to be like a concert venue or a big public event. So the kind of list we have of things that we definitely want to do in each residency are the finale performance, a living room concert, some sort of workshop, which we're kind of still figuring out what the best formula for that is, but we always like to work with a specific group, a target group for that. And then classroom visits. And then we do a daytime educational program for a K-12 partner. So that's kind of like our formula. And then outside of that, it's, well, what else is going on in town that might make sense for us to figure out how we can dovetail with that. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
Okay.
Cool. I just want to be respectful to everybody's time. It's 3:59, so we have 1 more minute. That's good.
Does anybody have comments or questions in our last minute?
I'll say thank you. You all seem to have a good team, and it's just thank you for doing what you're doing.
Well, thank you. I appreciate everyone listening to us. Yeah, about this.